BBC News. Hello, I'm Tom Watts. Brazilian health officials say they've registered nearly 4,200 coronavirus deaths in 24 hours, a new record. The public health system has been overwhelmed by a surge in the number of cases since the beginning of the year. Will Grant reports.
With so many fatalities, the pressure is growing on the country's right-wing president Jair Bolsonaro to acknowledge the severity of the situation the country is facing and act accordingly. Yet critics say he continues to underplay the extent of Brazil's COVID crisis, has tried to reverse lockdowns in several states, and even made a power grab for control of the military. Many government opponents also believe the number of COVID-related deaths in the country is a serious underestimation, saying reliable figures in Brazil have been hard to come by from the very start of the pandemic.
The United Nations is warning that about a third of the entire population of the Democratic Republic of Congo is facing acute hunger. 2 UN agencies describe the scale of the problem as staggering. Here's Will Ross.
The World Food Programme and the Food and Agriculture Organization say it's never been this bad, with more than 27 million Congolese now urgently in need of food, the highest number in any country in the world. Conflict is a key cause of hunger, especially in the eastern provinces, where dozens of rebel groups carry out frequent deadly attacks. The situation is dire in the central Kasai provinces, where there's also been conflict. The UN agencies say the COVID-19 pandemic and an economic downturn have made the situation even worse.
The United States has hailed the start of talks in Vienna, which aim to revive the international deal on Iran's nuclear program, as a welcome and constructive step. A State Department spokesman said he nonetheless expected the discussions to be difficult and did not anticipate an early breakthrough. Bethany Bell reports from Vienna.
Iran's chief nuclear negotiator, Abbas Araghchi, said the talks were constructive and on the right track. But he said it was too soon to say if they'd been successful. He said Iran would only go back to full compliance when the US had lifted all sanctions imposed after January 2017. President Biden's administration wants to revive the accord, but has said this requires negotiations. Officials from Britain, France and Germany are shuttling between the Iranian and American delegations in Vienna. Diplomats from Russia and China are also present. The talks are expected to be lengthy and difficult.
An Iranian ship is reported to have come under attack in the Red Sea. Media in Iran gave conflicting accounts, saying the vessel was damaged by a mine or a missile. They said the ship was deployed to support Iranian commandos taking part in anti-piracy missions, but Israeli newspapers described it as a spy ship. World news from the BBC. President Biden says the US is on track to exceed his goal of giving 200 million vaccinations in his first 100 days in office. Mr. Biden said more than 80% of teachers had received at least one coronavirus jab and reiterated that every American adult would be eligible from mid-April. The human rights group Amnesty International says the coronavirus pandemic has brutally exposed and deepened inequalities around the world. Its annual report says the worst impact has been on the most vulnerable people, including refugees. Here's Paul Adams.
Amnesty says those already marginalised, including women and refugees, have borne the brunt. Health and migrant workers have not been supported, and data showing an increase in domestic abuse in the UK is echoed in statistics from across the world. Gender-based violence has risen, exacerbated by the difficulties faced by victims isolated with their abusers. The report also highlights what it says are efforts to exploit the crisis to undermine human rights. Leaders in Hungary and the Gulf, it says, have introduced new laws against spreading false news, and China's persecution of its Uyghur population has increased.
Dozens of people have been killed during several days of clashes on the border between Ethiopia's Afar and Somali regions. Homes have been set on fire in villages on contested land. Officials in Afar accuse the Somali special forces of killing 30 people on Saturday. And the United States is facing a shortage of one of its most iconic condiments, tomato ketchup, due to the pandemic. Heinz, which produces the most popular brand, says it has been unable to keep up with surging demand for sachets of ketchup, although it is now boosting production. Demand for the sachets has been driven by a surge in takeaway food. Many outlets have complained they've had to switch to generic brands, but some say they've been unable to find another source. BBC News.